Hello, good morning. Welcome to the dialogues on nonviolence, religion, and peace. My name is Asher Kaufman, and I'm the director of the John B. Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies. This event is taking place on the traditional homelands of native peoples, particularly the Pokagon Potawatomi, who have been using this land for education and for other life-giving purposes for thousands of years and continue to do so. As we gather here for this lecture and dialogue, it is important to acknowledge our own place in the story and practices of colonialism and our responsibilities, not only to make this gesture of land acknowledgement, but also to reflect on Notre Dame's past, present, and future relationship with the Pokagon, the original stewards of this land, and to actively pursue ways to amend this relationship. This is the 26th year in which the Kroc Institute hosts this event, which has been enabled by the generous gift of Anne-Marie Yoder and her family. As in previous years, we have invited the now extended family of Anne-Marie Yoder, now the Yoder-Maus-Meyer family. They are here sitting with us. And I thank you all for your continued support and for joining us year after year to this event. The Dialogues on Nonviolence are one of the signature public events of the Kroc Institute. In the past, we have had a range of speakers who led these dialogues, from academics such as Jean Sharp, Erica Chenoweth, Tracy West, and Robert Orsi, to practitioners such as Ricardo Isquivia, founder director of Justapas in Colombia, Jean Zarou, the Palestinian peace activist and author, Professor Aza Karam, the Secretary General of Religions for Peace, and Tekla Namachanja, acting chair of the Truth and Justice and Reconciliation Commission of Kenya. To this list of distinguished thinkers and activists, we add today the Honorable Dr. Emilce Cuda. I would like to invite my friend and colleague, Jana Hunter-Bowman, Associate Professor of Peace Studies and Christian Social Ethics, a graduate of our PhD program, and a longtime friend of the Kroc Institute in general, to introduce Dr. Emilce Cuda. Before I do that, just one quick procedure about how the dialogues work. So Jana will come and introduce Dr. Cuda, then we'll have the presentation of Dr. Cuda. Then we will all have the opportunity to join all for lunch at outside of the hall, to be followed by continuation of the conversation in a form of a dialogue with our distinguished speaker. So this is the process, the procedure, and I'll invite Jana now to introduce our speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asher. Emilce Cuda, PhD, Doctor of Sacred Theology, is an Argentine social and moral theologian, university professor, and Roman Curia official. Dr. Cuda's work focuses on the intersection of theology and society. She has published and spoken extensively on social and moral theology, social justice, theology of the people and culture in Latin American context, populism, and the pontifical social magisterium. Dr. Cuda received her PhD in theology from the Pontificia Universidad Católica in Argentina. She also studied philosophy at the University of Buenos Aires, political science at Northwestern University, economics and business at the University of Business and Social Sciences. I met Emilce when theology professor Peter Casarella asked if she could speak at a political theology and ethics course that I was teaching in conversation with Jerry McKinney, also of the theology department. She delivered a brilliant lecture on political theorist Ernesto Laclau's theology and populism. And we began a meaningful and ongoing conversation at that time. At that occasion, Emilce gave me a copy of her 2014 book, Para leer a Francisco, Teología, Ética y Política, which has since been translated into English, Reading Francis, Theology, Ethics, and Politics. I once had the impression that Pope Francis read that book, agreed, indeed, this is how you should read Francis, and for that reason made history by appointing her, a layperson and a woman, Secretary of the Pontifical Commission for Latin America. And surely her understanding of Francis's vision played a role. Yet, at least according to Latin American theologians that I've come to work with more closely since, that was not the reason she was appointed. Emilce was nominated by the Pope for her history in Argentina and Latin America of creating networks with deep social commitments and a capacity for profound reflection, and then linking these networks to one another. She has been and is the principal investigator of theological research projects in interdisciplinary dialogue across many forms of knowledge. For example, she coordinates the Latin American Council of Social Science Working Group on the Future of Work and Care of the Common Home. This working group brings together historians, politicians, philosophers, leaders of popular movements, trade unions, indigenous and campesino groups, and theologians. In 2020, she organized us into disciplinary dialogue groups. I was with the other theologians, and I loved the name of our group, modestly called God. And then she placed our groups into conversation with one another. She cultivated a rich, complex dialogue by bringing different vantage points to bear on specific problems plaguing the important themes for her and in popular theologies, or theologies of the people, of the peripheries, the most marginalized, problems all participants were committed to addressing. Emilce excels at creating interdisciplinary dialogue across a broad range of actors using what the Kroc would call a problem-centered approach. In Latin America, this effort has a powerful political component. Political in the Catholic social thought sense of building a society in which the common good is the center. Another characteristic from her friend and colleague, José Carlos Camaño, Emilce has a gift of introducing religious and theological thought to diverse audiences by sharing Christian insights on the problems of the day. This has allowed her to teach at public universities as a moral and social theologian in Argentina, the National University and La Universidad de Buenos Aires, and enter into interdisciplinary conversations in the secular sphere. I say all of this because one can read her very impressive CV without knowing what led her to be at the Vatican, or all of the reasons that she is particularly well poised to speak here at the Kroc Institute on this occasion of the dialogues of nonviolence, religion, and peace. She is a person who knows Latin America and then thinks about the most difficult realities of Latin America, the peripheries and the margins from these different disciplines. And she has the gift of putting those forms of knowledge to work together to contribute to what Pope Francis calls unity in difference, to organize hope as the ultimate goal of politics. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Dr. Emilce Cuda to speak to Signs of the Times, Interdisciplinary Responses to Religious Nationalism, Neo-feudalism, and Hope.
Buenos días, hermanas y hermanos, distinguidos colegas y amigos. Buongiorno a tutti, tutti, tutti. Dear Dr. Ash Kaufman, Director of the Joan Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, thank you so much for this honorable invitation to participate at the 26th Annual Dialogue on Nonviolence, Relation and Peace. Thank you again for your lovely welcome. It is my pleasure to be here in this historical acknowledgement to share with all of you the social magisterium of the Holy Father Francisco. In his name and with humilitas, I added my name to the long list of honorable academic people that have been invited in the past to be in this beautiful place. Dear Dr. Jana, I call Hannah before because I am from Latin America, colleagues and friends, thank you so much for your generous presentation and for the years that we are working together in solidarity. It is an honor to share with you my work for the last years. The title of my presentation, I'm sorry about my English because, as you know, I am from Argentina and there we speak another language and I am doing my best. The title of my presentation comes from Pope Francis' teaching and as hymn from the reality of our Latin American people, immersed in the violence for centuries, but dreaming with the peace and full of hope. The hope that gives us our Lord Jesus Christ, so that our people may have life in abundance. John 10:10. He venido para que tengan una vida buena y en abundancia. The peace that we are looking for is the peace that can enable to us to have a good life in abundance. At the moment, la vida pende de un hilo. Life hangs by a thread. This is the name that CELAM, Latin American Episcopal Council, chose as its initiative 2025. La vida pende de un hilo. The reason is that a lot of people are killed doing diplomacy for the life. This system kills. Pope Francis says in his first document, the exhortation Evangelii Gaudium. As you know, we are in the 2025 Jubilee of Hope, and the challenge is to be pilgrims in hope. At the same time, the message for the World Day of Peace 2025 is how to convert public debt in ecological debt. Here, in my opinion, we have the key for peace: hope and debt. If we don't take seriously the public debt that is attacking human dignity, we can't stop the violence. The socio-environmental ecological crisis is attacking life on the planet. That is Laudato Si. The current system of disorganized productive relations require local, regional, and global social dialogue as the better politics. This is Fratelli Tutti. And need a new diplomacy. It is Laudato Deum. Faced with the possibility of a lethal structural outcome, Francis proposed in Laudato Si coordinate political reconfiguration of the world order. In this way, a new role emerged from Christians, becoming diplomats for life. According to Pope Francis, the guarantee of a good and abundant life for all is a global and sustainable peace. It is not minor issues if we take into account the actual context, a social, environmental, civilization crisis. These are times of desolation for humanity. But through the theological virtue of hope, we can see that God is doing something new, as the prophet Isaiah tells us. According to it, Pope Francis, in his message to the World Day of the Poor in 2020, quoted Bishop Tonino Bello and affirmed, "We cannot just wait. We have to organize hope." We cannot just wait. We have to organize hope. If our hope is not translated into concrete options and gestures of attention, justice, solidarity, and care for our common home, the suffering of the poor cannot be alleviated. The throwaway economy that forced them to live on the margins cannot be changed, and their hopes will be never flourishing again. It is up to us, especially as Christians, to organize hope, translate it into concrete everyday life, into human relationship, into social and political commitment. It makes me think of the work that so many Christians must do. End quote. The social teaching of the Church is a device of fundamental principles developed a posteriori of the experience, but in the light of the gospel, because the reality is superior than the idea, as Francis said in Evangelii Gaudium. That is the first and the most important difference between theology and ideology. It is the reality is superior than the idea. Theology is reality, incarnation. Ideology is just an idea. Thinking about the new order for no violence implies, as Pope Francis says, organizing hope and not only attending to needs. For needs, people are immobilized to death. For dreams, people move themselves for life. Pope Francis, in his letter to popular movements in 2020, he claims to move as an army with no other weapon than solidarity, hope, and the sense of community that is grinning in this day when not one is safe alone. He says in the dialogue in the Latin American businessman, we have a valued role, the networks and the gospels. Now it is time to talk about the best way to put them into practice, networks and gospel. We could add that we also have an anchor, hope. And now we can go sailing with the confidence that it is God who guides us and accompanies us along the way. Gospel, networks, and hope. That are the tools. Francis frequently relates theological virtues with the principles of the social teaching of the Church. In this sense, faith in God becomes community trust to guarantee human dignity. Love to God becomes social justice as solidarity and subsidiarity to guarantee universal access to the wealth create and develop. And hope in an eternal life becomes the dynamo to good life in abundance. Faith, love, and hope can be the tools to an international social dialogue that must transcend the walls of the parish, the borders of the city, the continental geopolitical limits, and the particular commercial interest. This must also be the modality for a new diplomacy to guarantee a dignity life, free of structural violence. The question is who organized the hope of the people in the middle of the structural economical violence? Because who can do it becomes the new Deus Mortalis. And the Deus Mortalis, the falsest God, owners of the vital resource to survive, control our life. As Pope Francis says in Fratelli Tutti, chapter 1, first, they isolate us. Then they offer us his false communitarian mystic of salvation. And at last, they take our soul. Pope Francis called it war of shadow. This is the worst mode of politics. This is the moment when politics become religion, because idolatry replaces social dialogue. It is the same moment in which religion becomes ideology. That is the reason why in Querida Amazonia, Francis does not speak about needs, but about dreams. Ecological dreams, social dreams, cultural dreams, and ecclesial dreams. Because for needs, people become slave, isolate. But for dreams, people become free and arrive to the unity. Hope must be perceived as the first common good and as the last dream, because without hope, it is impossible to organize a community to stop the structural violence. Also, hope must be considered common good at the technological and cultural level between scientific community. We need to active hope at different levels and place at the motor of the history, because the good life in abundance that Jesus Christ gives to us is the result of collaboration of the entire human family for generations between human and with God. Humanity working as an organized community through the history built this world that our generation is killing. That is the signifier of collaboration. Lavorare con altri, to work with others, to share the magic with others, as Coca-Cola publicity says, to sell a dream, especially in a globalization economy. Of course, everyone works, but not each of them are economically recognized as formal workers. And there is the point where the violence starts. The great theme is the work, St. Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti. In this way, vaccines and connectivity, as well as civil and social rights, come from the hope of the people, organized as community, working for recognized needs as rights. To start the creation process again, because now the money works for us in the financial market, but not the working class. So to start the creation process again, we need Christianism with its Christians as a new diplomacy to negotiate the good life before the new Deus Mortalis. They are the owners of everything. That was, is, and will be the fight for recognizing human dignity through law. When necessities become law, the common good becomes concrete. There we have a great example of reality as superior to the idea. The revolutionary people were, are, and will be real diplomats, getting peace through social justice. To stop the structural violence, we need to control again, as one people, it is como un pueblo, the natural wealth that God created for to have a life in abundance. For example, Latin America, Africa, and part of Asia are not a resource to be exploited by the rest of the world, as Pope Francis told to university students of Africa in November 2022. Stop extractivism is to stop the violence against the power and against the earth. From the Greeks, diplomacy was to save lives. After Jesus Christ, diplomacy was for having a dignity life. I would like to propose you as Christians to think about peace in terms of a new world order of care. For that, first of all, we must pay attention to the subtitle of the encyclical Laudato Si, for the care of the common home. The common home care is central. It is about taking care of the wealth created by God and developed by all the human family. The current pontifical social teaching for caring for the common home proposes a new paradigm from a new diplomacy. It means to change the logic of productivity based on income and accumulation for the logic of care based on a dignified life without postponing the interests of businessmen or usurping fair income, but guarantee the care to everybody. With the Christians, as the new diplomacy for peace, must be creative to negotiate life, not death. In other words, a new diplomacy by the organized community as executive will be at the service of the good life to everybody and not at the service of capital concentrated in the central countries or in few families. If we don't stop this system that kills suddenly, we will have a new feudalism system based on the extractivism of human and natural resources, convert into income and bled out in foreign currency or human traffic. To guarantee peace, it is necessary to think of a new order based on caring for the creation in all its forms, putting the economy at the service of the better politics, as solidarity and subsidiarity, so that universal access to the common goods guarantee human dignity and, as a result, give us the peace. The number 169 of Fratelli Tutti, one of the greatest Latin American riches, is defined: communitarian organization. The communitarian organization was born to do advocacy as another mode to say diplomacy, if we continue being in a state of law. But when we are not in a state of law, we can't do advocacy. We must do diplomacy because we are asking for life, not for rights. It's a primary step of this. Pope Francis says that in the communitarian organization, there are experiences of solidarity that grow from below, from the subsoil of the planet. Pope Francis speaks about one of the richest available, community organization as experience of solidarity. It should be remembered that the concept of forced solidarity refers to institutionalization rather than individual voluntary helping others during the free times, especially in weekends. Civil and social rights must be perceived as institute solidarity as a satisfactory result of unity in the difference and concrete experience of salvation. The social rights are the result of a communitarian organization moved by hope, not by necessity. Rights ultimately are dreams that become reality by organized hope from below to up to stop the structural violence. The concept of an organizing community does not apply to a particular community, but to a network of communities. The form of organized community does not only apply into the country's border. The interhuman family must tend to reconfigure as a community of communities. Unfortunately, in the international division of labor that occurred at the end of the 19th century has determined some countries to advance industrial development, while others was determined to save their natural wealth without taxes or ethical limits. Thinking about diplomacy for not violence implies thinking about how to reconfigure production of the war stage, otherwise social peace will be not possible. As I told you before, one of the reach of Latin America is the capacity of communitarian organization at continental level. CELAM, for example, today is expanded to another complementary mode of communitarian organization. The name is SEAMA. CELAM is Episcopal Catholic Conference. SEAMA is Ecclesial Conference. It is Catholics and other religions, bishops and lay people, popular movement, universities. By the sense of faith, sensus fidei, from the Second Vatican Council, the organized community can to see what happened, to discern what to do, and to act as one people, como un pueblo. It is a good example how two people without deus mortalis can by themselves organize the hope for life. However, in the chaotic moment of the system, the diplomatic role of Christians can play a great role toward peace. Two other linked concepts are in the quoted fragment of Fratelli Tutti: confluence and coordination. It means that without a coordinated mode of communitarian diplomacy, the society remains disorganized. That is the chaotic moment of the system when religions occupy the place of the politics. But be careful, because we have theology and ideology, and discernment is not easy. In that moment, when religions occupy the place of the politics, we have at the same time theology and ideology, and the discernment to know who is and from where the new Deus Mortalis is talking to me is not easy. The better politics is coordination to act for the common good. The rest is bad politics. It is ideology and masked as religion. The better politics, like the better theology, is communitarian organization. It is assembly, ecclesia, and public war about the common good. The public war about the common good is the God politics. The war about the common good in a private space is not politics. And other public war that is not speaking about common good is not the better politics. On the contrary, will be ideology. Politics and theology as an incarnate reality is practiced to guarantee the dignified life, universal access to create and develop goods, and institutionalized solidarity and subsidiarity. That is politics, that is theology, social theology and not ideology. When the borders of the Roman Empire and its character of citizenship collapsed, theologians and bishops become diplomats. They must organize the hope, first around baptisms as a new citizenship, second around collection as a way of comprehensive promotion of the new communities. Let us remember that we are not in a time of change, but in a change of air. So we must reconsider how to evangelize. Now is when. The pontificates Benedict XVI and Pio XII were marked by the First and Second World Wars, respectively. Now Francis has to lead during a piecemeal war. Since he took office in 2013, the Pope has been talking about the Third World War in stage. He said that in our war, there are not longer just pieces of war in one country or another, but we live in a war of pieces. Because, as Pope Francis said in Laudato Si, everything is connected. The armed conflict that is being experienced in Europe is not the only one. In other latitudes, there are dramatic conflicts that have been going for years, such in Gaza, Syria, Colombia, Mexico, Haiti. Christians always have used the voice of martyr to those who defend their fight in Jesus Christ to the point of losing their life, from the persecution in the Roman Empire to the totalitarian regimes in the 20th century, as well in Europe during the Second World War, as in Latin America in the Dirty War. Let us pay attention, for example, when Pope Francis refers to the martirizada Syria or martirizada Ukraine. Maybe we must start to speak about martyred workers or martyred migrants. On the contrary, we can't understand why diplomacy must be for life. This shows us that there are martyrdom and diplomacy is necessary. But how to organize the hope in the face of an economical martyrdom reality that calls for diplomacy? It is not possible to imagine a new world order if we do not first imagine how to end the suffering of the innocent. Francis said that we must be creative, and that is politic, the best politic, a social dialogue. As an image of the Father, Creator, Christians must be creative. Finally, a real diplomat is a poet. It is necessary to dream if we want to stop violence, as Pope Francis tells us in Querida Amazonia. To dream means hope like dynamo that can to convert passion into community action, as he said to the popular movements. Francis tells us that the civilization crisis cannot be resolved by Christians alone, but through ecumenical and interreligious dialogue. It is the point from where diplomacy for life comes to play in the game of war reconfiguration for a new order. That is social fraternity in a multifaceted key. As Francis says in Laudato Si, there is not historical fatalism to which we must succumb, but rather a salvation that occurs in a community key, because no one is saved alone. That is the community of salvation, about which Pope Francis speaks in Fratelli Tutti. This is the history of the Church as economy of salvation. In the second of the social catechesis of the Circle to Care the World, Pope Francis spoke of two temptations, indifference and individualism. In his speech for the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Organization, he mentioned the third temptation, which alludes fully to social life. The third temptation is elitism. On that occasion, the Pope talked about world leaders who are in an advantageous position with respect to making decisions about life and death. They have their diplomats, but we have. He told those leaders that every election has two possible paths. The path that leads to global co-responsibility and solidarity based on justice, and the path that leads to self-sufficiency, nationalisms, protectionisms, individualisms, and isolation, leaving out the poorest. However, if we want to stop the violence, we cannot continue ignoring that this tragedy, as the Holy Father said, has as its primary cause the denial of all rights, because it prevents people from political freedom, economic sovereignty, but also social justice, in addition to the dramatic attack on the environment that all people need to survive. Finally, as Francis says about the war, it is a failure of politics and humanity. That is why the Holy Father said, let us not remain in theoretical discussion. And he asked us to touch the suffering flesh of Jesus Christ in the poor people. Religion as contemplation cannot be a mere aestheticism pleasure. It must be about contemplating many civilians massacred as collateral damage in all types of war, which are always structural violence. Let us not give sovereign judgment to the new theologian of public opinion who tell us what the truth is and whose side it is on. Let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of hope. Let us recover our sovereign condition as communitarian diplomats of the kingdom, as the people of God that we are. This condition of legal subjects to judge that we receive by the grace of God enable us to discern not what the truth is, but where the truth is. But where is the truth? Pope Francis tells us, let us, the victims, let's pay attention to the truth of those victims of violence. Let us look at reality from their eyes and listen to their stories with an open heart, and ensure that we will not be disturbed but being treated as naive for choosing peace. As Christians, we see, hear, and touch the truth in the suffering flesh of the victims. Then we will be able to speak about the truth in the first person. without the need for the interpretation of those false prophets. According to Francis, to make possible the development of the world community capable of realizing fraternity from between different people, pueblos, and nations that live social friendship, it is necessary the best politics, but at the service of the true common God. It is popular politics as organized community. It is representative democracy. And then as a global community network, a community of communities between the entire human family. This is the best policy because thanks to the dynamo of hope, it set in motion the passion until it becomes community action to institutionalize social justice as first principle of the economy that can to guarantee the peace. For this reason, the opposite of war is political love. Now, what love are we talking about? What kind of law can guarantee the peace to allow a new world order? Social law, according to Francis. Love or charity is to accompany a person who suffers, but charity is also everything that is done, even without having direct contact with that person, to modify the social condition that cause their suffering. Political love is public. It is the care by the people and for the people as an organizing community, as state at all levels, in a subsidiarity manner, mobilizing for institutionalization of social and environmental rights, controlling that their governments do not fall into corruption or totalitarianism. Charity as political love manifests itself in the form of law and public policies to guarantee universal access to technology, to creation and development, and also the access of all social sectors of the decision process of the modes of production, consumption, and reinvestment of the wealth that God donates to us so that we all may have a life. Like John 23 in Pacem in Terris and Benedict 16 in Caritas in Veritatis, Francis explained that economic financiation with transnational characteristics tend to predominate over politics. The situation, according to Francis, vindicates the imperative need of the maturation of stronger and more effectively organized international institutions and requests a reform of the United Nations and other organizations. Now Pope Francis invites us to dream together with the head, with the heart, and with the hands. Let's dream about how to create decent work as the first social organizer. We must also create decent work for businessmen to prevent extractivism, to prevent illegal sale, to prevent scientific manipulation, to prevent tax evasion, to prevent human traffic, to prevent forced migration. Let's dream together because either we unite or we sing. Francis made gestures of unity. Francis invited to speak leaders for other religions. Francis received politics from the right and from the left. Francis received tutti, tutti, tutti. That is the social dialogue. It's an example to open. Pope Francis speak at the 70th Assembly of the United Nations, and there he said that we have tools for the best politics, and that tool, the most important, is the social dialogue. Then the economical and interreligious dialogue, and the dialogue with popular movements as a new form of political organization in the peripheries. However, perhaps thinking about a global scheme of balance of power, the Pope emphasized more than his predecessors the need for a plural framework, composed as a stronger and more effectively organized international institution. This is understood from France's critical vision regarding globalization. The system has become obsolete, especially in terms of preventing the economic financial from being above politics. It is worth clarifying that these new international governments proposed by the pontiff cannot be confused with the search for a king of war state. The Pope understands this international community for the common good as polyedrical. Political theology foundation of the state must be outside of this new configuration. For the global proposal, Francis not only interact with ambassadors, but with young people and different generations. We must invite everybody to the table to discern about what we can do. In conclusion, to stop the violence, we must consider that reality is superior to ideas. This principle pushes us to listen to the violence from the victims and not from a false prophet. According to Pope Francis, the first violence mode is a system that kills. So the first cause of violence is an unjust economical financial system. No violence implies social justice as social love, and for that we need dignity work. In the chaotic moment that represents the change of era, Christians are called to be diplomats of the good life, and people to be unit in the difference as an organized community mode, for to see, to discern, and to act from the gospel, but in a secular political mode that respects the participate democracy as a style of life with gospel flower. What Francis proposed is an organization where the hope moves the people, and that is the new diplomacy, because we are going to lose our life. In the past, we spoke about dignity life. Now, we are going back. We must to defend the life. Well, thank you so much. Sorry about my bad pronunciation, and I appreciate a lot that you are here. Thank you.
I have two questions here. You okay with that? Before we go for lunch. So thank you very much. And I would like to take the opportunity to have one or two questions right now before we all have to lunch. So go ahead.
Yes.
But one. So I was fascinated by your use of the term organized hope, because I have actually, perhaps it's because I'm not a theologian, I've never heard the two words together. You know, let's have hope, let's hope for, but organized hope is something that was central to your presentation. And I don't know, it made me think, perhaps, where is it coming from? What are the roots of this concept to organize hope, which for me was a really unique combination of words.
Thank you, because that is a more important question. The sentence comes from a bishop, Italian bishop, that Pope Francis take from him, but it's important to understand why, because the theological virtues is something that we receive like a gift for God, but we mustn't do nothing to achieve it. So it's impossible to lose. That's the reason why, in the popular sense, the people say, la última cosa que se pierde es la esperanza. The last thing that you can lose is the hope. And that is true. And the enemy, with capital E, know that. So the enemy go directly to the hope of the people and organize that. I give you an example. In my country, in Argentina, the last presidential campaign was about hope. The people was bad, and the candidate said, you must trust in me. You are going to suffer a lot for a lot of time. And he offered nothing to them, which is the hope that he organized, that he was going to castigate, punish to the bad people who was responsible of the poorest. So the hope in a final judge, this is the hope. So if we not pay attention to organize, we, the Christians, who I suppose know very well what are the theological virtues, the people have the theological virtues. The people have the hope. Who organize the hope, take the people to the kingdom, but to the other kingdom. That's the reason why Deus Mortalis, se me fue el nombre del filósofo. Deus Mortalis is a category from the modernity, is the person who take the place of God. And why? Because he is the owner, the life or the death. At the moment, we have Deus Mortalis. And when you are behind a Deus Mortalis, you can negotiate rights. It's like viernes, ¿no? En Robin, bueno, estoy en mal momento, cambiar de idioma. But the idea is who organize the hope of the people. Because if we listen, in the last 10 years, the political campaigns are not around rights, are around faith, are around religious principles. So there is not the space of the war, is not the space of the arguments, is the space of the faith, love, and hope. So Pope Francis said, careful, who is organizing the hope? Now, this is the idea.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, I remember Barack Obama had the word hope central to his campaign in 2000. When was that? That was, yeah, eons ago, decades ago. Yeah. Something to think about. I mean, given the moment and the reality in which we live, where I think there is this sense of perhaps the...
And I'm sorry, but it's important to understand this, because this is the topic of the Jubilee 2025, is hope. And is directly linked with the debt, the public debt. It's important how Pope Francis puts in relationship the public debt with the hope, because the real hope for poor people is how to change the economical system. So it's his social magisterium, of course, but it's important to understand why he said that. No?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Dr. Cuda.